A boy without any powers was part of a team filled with heroes, but he was eventually thrown out because everyone thought he was useless and didn't contribute much. Left alone with nowhere to go and no money to spare, it turned out he was also very weak in combat. The boy then shares the tale of Fena, an S-level monster with the power to destroy a huge city all by itself. Once, a village that was constantly attacked by this beast spent all its money to hire the boy's team, known as the Blazing Dragon Fangs. On that fateful night, Fena suddenly appeared from nowhere and tossed a boy, who was on watch, high into the air. The leader of the Blazing Dragon Fangs immediately ordered Bandana to jump into action. She fired a metal cable around the monster's body in an effort to trap it, but Fena bit through the cable and hurled her against a wall, causing a serious injury. The team's healer quickly rushed to help her recover so she could rejoin the fight. Bandana managed to stop the beast again, giving the leader a chance to strike it with his flaming sword, setting it ablaze and winning the battle for the team. According to the boy who tells this story, the team members were Bandana, the Swift Ranger, Maruz, the Priestess, and Guva, the Fiery Warrior. After defeating Fena, the Blazing Dragon Fangs became celebrated as local heroes. The boy, who had been removed from the battle early on and now recounts these events. After their hard-earned victory, the team sat down to enjoy a big, satisfying meal. But as soon as Guva bit into a piece of meat, he sneered that it was garbage and threw it aside, grumbling about the village's lousy food quality. The youngest boy rushed over to clean up the mess that the leader had left behind, and Nova ordered that Kurt prepare something proper to eat. With a cheerful smile, the young lad promised to take care of it, while Bandana remarked that they should savor the meal since it might be their very last one provided by Kurt. Confused, the young boy asked what that meant, and Nova bluntly replied that the kid was too slow to see that he was being fired. He was so weak he couldn't even defeat a feeble, cramping slime pup. Maruz reminded him that, by the rules of their world, each team must have 4 members. This meant that if they really wanted to grow stronger, they needed to add a high-level mage to boost their overall power. Not missing a chance for a joke, Bandana added that although Carrot might help carry their burdens, he was ironically the heaviest burden of all. In a final desperate act, Carrot even begged the leader for mercy to remain on the team, but Nova kicked him in the stomach and told him to shut up. After all this, Carrot couldn't help but think that his life was all too typical, a powerless boy who traveled with strong heroes until he was cast aside and left with nowhere to go. After hitching a ride on a cart, Kurt eventually arrived in a city with only a few coins left from his last paycheck as part of the newly promoted SS rank teams. He made his way to the Hallow Work branch to look for a job. When he walked in, he was surprised to be warmly greeted by an employee from the very branch he had come to seek work. She explained that he would need to go through an interview and take an aptitude test. As he sat down to begin, he was asked his name and age. He answered, Kurt Ruckings, 15 years old. When asked more questions, he revealed that he was born in Haste Village in the Sheen Mountains and had worked as a jack-of-all-trades for the recently promoted SS rank teams. Even though he had been let go from that team, the employee believed that having this experience on his resume was a major advantage, which made Carrot feel thankful that Nova and his former teammates had given him that opportunity. Next, Carrot had to take an aptitude test, a special talent given by God meant to uncover his hidden skills. The test measured abilities on a scale from G rank to SSS, levels that separated boys from men. For instance, while a D rank might not be able to cut through steel with a certain sword, an Ankh could possibly do it with the same blade. Kurt had hoped this test would mark a big turning point in his life, but the results showed he was no higher than G rank in every area. In short, the boy was a total underachiever, likely destined for a life of routine 6-day shifts. However, the woman remembered they hadn't yet checked his forging and alchemy skills because the technician was missing, so Carrot would have to wait about a week to see if he had talent in that area. The problem was that he didn't have enough money to stay in the city for that long. Thinking quickly, she decided on another test and asked him to lift a sandbag that was in the room. When he touched it, Carrot felt his mana being drained, and although he managed to lift the bag, its weight forced his back to bend forward. Still, the test administrator declared that he should be strong enough for some construction work. As luck would have it, a border town in the Margraviate of Tarkin was seeking people to repair its walls, and Kate was happy to find a job. Later, as he approached the construction foreman with the instruction letter he had received, the man glanced at his fragile frame and doubted his ability. But since he was short on workers, it would have to do. So, the foreman handed Kurt the task of mixing cement and fixing the wall. Kate was just about to ask whether he should infuse the cement with mana to make it stronger when the foreman interrupted him. The foreman explained that he would return in 3 hours to inspect the progress and expected that by then, At least half a barrel of cement would have been used, with payment based on how well the work was done. As Kurt watched his work unfold, he thought that adding mana was such an ordinary step that the foreman likely assumed he already knew how to do. 3 hours later, when the boss came back to check, he was shocked at what Kurt had done. Kurt apologized for running out of cement, though that wasn't the real problem. In truth, he had already fixed 1/3 of the huge western wall in just a few hours. The boss was amazed and asked how he managed to reach the top parts with no ladders or platforms around. Kurt said he just used a really long stick to apply the cement. Realizing he had misjudged the skinny kid, the boss asked how long he planned to stay. Kurt said a week would be perfect. The boss gave him the rest of the day off and handed over a bag of coins, everything he had on him, promising to pay the rest later. Kurt couldn't believe how much he got paid. After getting scraps from his old crew, this felt amazing and gave him a new sense of motivation. Just as the boss had guessed, 3 days later, people walking by the north and west walls couldn't believe how fast the repairs were done. That same day, the contractor told Kurt he wasn't needed anymore. He had finished the entire wall on his own, leaving the others without work. As a small compliment, the contractor said Kurt's work was on par with an SS rank worker and gave him the remaining coins, suggesting he find a new job in the capital. Even after doing such great work, Kurt returned to Hello feeling a bit down, like he'd been left behind again. While talking to a clerk, he noticed a pretty girl arguing with an employee. She wanted to hire a miner but refused to pay unless results were guaranteed. She also didn't want to pay anything up front for a risky mining job. The employee told her to find investors, but she said the mountain would be taken away if taxes weren't paid within a week. Kurt suddenly offered to take the job, saying he was good at digging. But the woman didn't like how skinny he looked and wanted a stronger dwarf instead. The problem was, hiring the dwarf cost 10 silver coins, which she wasn't willing to pay. So in the end, she settled for Kurt. After she left, the clerk joked that Kurt was too kind and cute looking, like he belonged in a fancy lodge. Her co-worker told her to calm down and handed her the card for Kurt's payment, 200 coins. She was so shocked she tripped and fell over the bags Kurt had carried. The co-worker explained that those weren't normal sandbags. They were used to measure mana. They only get heavy when someone with strong magic touches them. Usually, only top-level mags can even activate them. Curious, she picked one up. It wasn't that heavy now, but remembering how Kurt struggled with it earlier made her wonder who this kid really was. Later, Kurt was sent to work in a remote place, where he and his new boss were supposed to share a small tent. But he quickly refused, saying there was no way he could sleep next to someone as beautiful as her. This made Ulysses flustered. She thought he was teasing her, but Kurt said he honestly thought she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen in his 15 years of life. Embarrassed, she told him to shut up. She explained she'd been an adventurer since age 10 and didn't see herself as pretty after all the fights and hard times she'd been through. She gave him some badly wrapped food, which Kurt appreciated a lot. It had been a long time since someone cooked for him. His old teammates never shared meals like this. That night, unable to sleep, Kurt turned over and noticed Ulysses sleeping in only her lower underwear. He nearly squeaked out loud but stopped himself, thinking how careless she was. After all, he was still a guy. But Ulysses wasn't as clueless as he thought. She was actually pretending to sleep to see if Kurt would try anything. She was surprised to find out he was completely harmless. In fact, she started to find him kind of cute and fun to mess with. The next morning, she was shocked to see Kurt had slept outside the tent the whole night. Even more surprising, he had fixed the button on her coat. Feeling thankful, she thought maybe he wasn't meant to be a worker after all, but he was here now, so it was time to work. She told him they needed to earn 10 gold coins by the end of the week and planned to start digging anywhere they could. But Kurt stopped her, saying that was a bad idea. He offered to check the land and find a real mineral spot first. After some back and forth, Ulysses gave in. Kurt quickly found a crystal worth 3 gold coins and then pulled out a bunch more in no time. Ulysses asked if they should sell them right away, but Kurt said most were too small. Instead, he said they could be turned into magical crystals, which were worth much more. She doubted him. Only a few people in the kingdom could do that. But before she could say more, Kurt did it in seconds. Something that took Pros an hour. He did like it was nothing. That night, Ulysses went to sell the crystals while Kurt stayed behind. Watching him wave goodbye, she couldn't help but think he looked too adorable. In town, she tried to sell the crystals but was asked for proof they were local. Foreign crystals needed special permits. She said they were made locally and showed her necklace proving she was connected to the royal family. That got her access to the capital via buy a teleportation stone. Still, she knew no one would believe how the crystals were actually made. She visited a friend and asked her to buy the crystals. The friend checked one and said it didn't shine much, so it was worth maybe 10 silver coins. Ulysses expected that, since Carrot had little time to add mana. But then the buyer looked closer and changed her mind. That single crystal had 10 times the usual mana, hidden by a special layer that stopped it from leaking. She paid 10 gold coins for it. In total, she bought 50 crystals and paid 500 gold coins. But she had two conditions. First, the crystals could only be sold in her shop. Second, she wanted to know who made them. Ulysses refused to reveal anything without permission. The buyer, now serious, said she was a royal court mage and that this was an order. Ulysses said she had quit the royal service and didn't have to obey. In the end, the buyer asked her to at least make sure the boy didn't leave the country and to tell him he was being offered a high position at a royal lab, with a noble title, maybe even count. Still shocked at owning 500 gold coins, Ulysses went back to the clerk and asked about Carrot. The clerk tried to protect his info, but after seeing her royal crest, she told Ulysses that Kurt used to work for the Blazing Dragon Fangs but was kicked out. Recently, he earned 200 coins by fixing a wall in record time. Ulysses then told the clerk to put 499 coins into Kurt's account and not share any details with anyone. A few hours later, she returned to find Kurt had built a full wooden house by himself in less than a day. When she asked how, he casually said, "It's just how we do things back in my hometown."